واحد من وراك يخبطك كف، اغلط بالعربي بالعبري، يا ابن زنا يا ابن حرام.
Thousands of Palestinians have been detained in Gaza, taken away by Israeli forces to prisons and military bases, accused of links to Hamas. Some will be fighters, but many are just civilians. Those released allege horrific torture.
لما مسكتني من خصيايا ومن بشري وجرحتني في ايدها في اظافرها وغرزتهم في بشري، من كتر ما صرت اصرخ صرت عض في السلك الله عزك زي الكلب.
We've been investigating allegations of widespread sexual abuse, a war crime. We've spoken to half a dozen former prisoners.
بس لا هو طرفة هيك خملها زي هيك، القد حديد لما تفتحها زي هيك ويحط لك اياها جوا بخلي مخك يطلع.
On social media, Israeli soldiers have openly mocked their captives, posing for selfies alongside them. Out of sight, they appear to have done far, far worse. This is leaked CCTV video of what Israeli military police allege is a detainee being sodomized as he's hidden from the view of security cameras by riot shields. The arrest of a group of soldiers accused of involvement has outraged Israel's powerful far right. A furious mob gathered outside the base, Israel's most notorious detention camp, Side Taman, calling for the soldiers' release. For many Israelis, these protesters are dangerous extremists, but amongst them are senior members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's government.
אתם צריכים להבין, מחבלי הנוח'בות שאנסו, טבחו והתעללו בבני עמנו, מצאו שיטה חדשה, הולכים ומתבכיינים ומשתנקרים שאיזה חייל נגע בהם.
What happens in Side Taman is murky and secretive. These photos by a whistleblower give a rare glimpse. Detainees bound, blindfolded like this at all times. We spoke to the man you see here. Ibrahim has now been released back into Gaza. He was taken away by Israeli soldiers from a hospital where his children were being treated without explanation, held for 8 months at multiple sites. This photo, he says, was taken whilst he was being punished for trying to help another sick prisoner.
العقاب انك تقف على القدير بالساعتين تقف ضلك واقف زي هيك بهاي الشكل رافع ايديك بدك اساعدك بيجيك بقول لك لا بدك اساعدك اريحك تقول له ريحني بقول لك قول انا ابن شرموطه قول انا اخو شرموطه قول انه نتنياهو اختي.
Detainees taken from Gaza are unable to contact their families. Hardly any have access to lawyers. A controversial Israeli law means they can be held for indefinite periods of time without being convicted. Ibrahim says torture was widespread, especially during interrogations.
قتلت اخوتي قصفت دارنا اي اساس بتقول اي وين الاسرى وين ايش بعرف وين الاسرى ساقني في اماكن حساسه كان يضربني في اماكن حساسه ساقني فيها كذا مره عابت ما انا يعني كنت يعني اصيح زي الاطفال فلما شافني بصيح وانا صرت اقول له انا عيان انا مش قادر انا مريض اللي هو ايش بقول لي كلكم ممثلين انتوا شعب ممثل انت كذاب.
Hundreds of detainees have been released back into Gaza, frail, still bearing scars from incarceration. The worst torture Ibrahim says he faced, sexual assault.
طمل طبعا وانت مطمل بتبقى بقول هنا هدول بيبقوا شباب وبنات الطرف في الطيز بتنحط بس لا هو طرفة هيك خملها زي هيك القد حديد لما تفتحها زي هيك ويحط لك اياها جوا بخلي مخك يطلع.
5 soldiers from Side Taman are under house arrest, accused of aggravated sodomy of another detainee in the most high-profile case linked to the site.
That's the entrance to the Sderot base just over there. We're not allowed inside. Even the Red Cross has been denied access. The details of this one particular incident are horrific. A doctor treating the victim said he suffered broken ribs and a tear in his lower bowel as a result of an item being inserted into his anus. The abuse allegedly meted out inside the base is believed to be much more widespread than this one case.
The Israeli army says it's investigating the deaths of more than 30 Palestinians held here. Naji Abbas is part of a human rights group investigating the allegations of torture.
We visited a Gazan doctor in detention, a Gazan surgeon. He met at least 10 people who faced sexual assaults in the same way.
Things inserted into their rectum?
Exactly.
Do you have any faith that these other allegations of sexual abuse you've uncovered will be investigated by the Israelis?
We applied to the Supreme Court with dozens of complaints and testimonies regarding torture, violence, beating, medical negligence. But all these complaints didn't change the situation.
Human rights groups are fighting to close Sderot down. Only around 24 detainees now remain there. We spoke to one whistleblower who saw the site's medical facilities. He never witnessed abuse, but was horrified by the conditions.
All the patients I saw had each arm and leg handcuffed to the sides of the bed. All the patients were blindfolded, and they were basically naked, besides wearing diapers.
Must have been quite shocking to see.
Having someone handcuffed and incapable of moving around or changing their position even slightly, I mean, I think it's probably, at least in my view, a sort of torture.
For Israelis, though, Hamas's atrocities of October the 7th are still raw, and some are furious about the focus on the rights of Palestinian detainees amidst the war. These are right-wing protesters disrupting a court hearing, angered that the Sderot base could be closed down. Amongst the crowd, posters of abducted hostages and dead soldiers, and a simple slogan, an eye for an eye. Here, they see all of Gaza as complicit with Hamas and refuse to accept the allegations of torture.
And this judge and this court speaking about the right of these people that killed these people, that kidnapped these people. And we don't want to speak about the rights, we want to speak about our brothers' rights.
All the people from Gaza who've been released, but who say that they were beaten, that they've been electrocuted, some of whom say that they've been raped, are they just lying, do you think?
Yeah. Let's say 19% that they are lying.
Why would they lie?
Why they lie? It's the way of life. If you see Hamas agenda, they say...
But these are people who have been released, so presumably they're not Hamas.
I'm sure they are.
Others appear unabashed advocates for torture. This was a lawmaker from Netanyahu's party.
להכניס מקל לרקטום של בן אדם זה לגיטימי? כן, אם הוא נוח'בה הכל לגיטימי לעשות לו. הכל!
Close to half of those detained have been cleared for release. This was Faraj, a farmer from Gaza City, with his family before the war. This was the moment he was reunited with them after months detained in Sderot and another Israeli prison. He says he was never told why he was being held. Soldiers used him as a go-between with other prisoners. Some confided the sexual abuse they said they'd faced.
يخجل اخذه اغسله وإشي ايش مالك ايش عاملين لك يحط العصايه واللي يحطوا العصايه في مؤخرتي يعني لك ايش بتقول يقول لي والله يلبسها الكله يلبس الكمكم هذا الكندوم في بوز العصايه ويحطها في قفايه يحط.
Faraj shows us how he was forced to kneel and was beaten. His role as a helper in Sderot didn't mean he was spared from torture. He describes a scene many detainees have referred to, being interrogated in the disco room.
فلما باخذك من البراكس وبوديك عليها بنعرف انه احنا رحنا ايش على التحقيق خلص عشان ما حدش يسمع صوت اللي بيصرخوا كمان وإيش اللي في البراكسات ما يسمعوش صوت اللي بيصرخوا وبتحقق معاهم. الطريقة اللي أنا تم استخدامها معايا اللي هو تقعد على الكرسي المفتوح، ظهر مفتوح، مكلبش من إيديك، رجليك مكلبشين، بتجيب المربط البلاستيك طول تقريبا متر أو 90 سم المربط البلاستيك، بيمسك المربط هذا ويصير يخبطك فيه زي الكرباج.
It's not just sedate a man where serious abuse is alleged to have occurred. This is an Israeli news report on Ketziot prison. One soldier remarks the conditions are too lenient. Alongside detainees from Gaza, Israeli jails like this have seen a massive rise in prisoners from the occupied West Bank in East Jerusalem.
We've reached out to around a dozen former detainees who we'd been told may have suffered some form of sexual abuse, but all of them were too afraid to do an interview. Some of them even said they'd been specifically warned by the intelligence services not to speak out. One man has agreed. We're on our way to meet him now.
Ramzi is a Palestinian activist from Jerusalem. He was arrested last year, before October the 7th, accused of links to Hamas, which he denies.
ولكن بعد 7 أكتوبر تم انتزاع كل الحقوق كاملة منا.
He says sexual assault formed part of the abuse he suffered and witnessed too.
قاموا بوضع الماجنومتر الفحص في الخلفية خلال التفتيش. خلال التفتيش أيضا كانوا يتعمدوا بضرب الأماكن الحساسة من الأمام، بضرب بشكل قوي. إنه هو ليس اغتصاب لمجرد إنه هو بده يغتصبك، هو بده يغتصبك أو بده يقوم باغتصابك أو التحرش فيك أو يذلك يكسرك.
Israeli officials know the International Criminal Court will be looking into the treatment of Palestinian detainees. It's likely one factor behind the few arrests of soldiers that have been made. But it seems the true scale of abuse is yet to emerge.
Secunda Kamani reporting there. Well, in response to our report, the Israel Defense Forces said the IDF rejects outright allegations concerning systematic abuse of detainees in the Sedetaman detention facility, including allegations of sexually abusing detainees. The IDF acts in accordance with Israeli law and international law and protects the rights of individuals held in detention facilities under its responsibility. They said concrete complaints would be forwarded to relevant bodies and, when required, criminal investigations are opened in cases where there is a reasonable suspicion of criminal misconduct. The Israeli Prison Service told us all prisoners are detained according to the law. All basic rights required are fully applied by professionally trained prison guards. We're not aware of the claims you described, and as far as we know, no such events have occurred under IPS responsibility. Nonetheless, prisoners and detainees have the right to file a complaint that will be fully examined and addressed by official authorities. And a dubbed version of that report will be available on our website later. Well, joining me now is Eylon Pinkas, a former Israeli diplomat who has been Chief of Staff and Foreign Policy Advisor to one Israeli Prime Minister and 4 foreign ministers. Thanks so much for joining me, Mr. Pinkas. What do you make of what you saw in that report?
Hi, Jackie. Well, look, it's very simple. I mean, it's not very simple. It's very tragic. But the bottom line is this. Even if 50% of these stories are true, even if 25% of their accounts are accurate, it is inexcusable, it is intolerable, and Israel should investigate this much more thoroughly than what appeared in the responses, the official responses that you got. But on a broader, from a broader perspective, Jackie, you saw both sides here. And this just illustrates in a horrific way how dehumanizing this entire thing is. How Israelis have been dehumanized, how Palestinians have been dehumanized, how they each dehumanize each other. And in the end, this is what we're left with.
I mean, as you say, you see both sides in that report. Extraordinary scenes of far-right demonstrators storming army bases, storming the courts in protest at the arrest of soldiers for alleged abuse. I mean, what do you think the wider Israeli public feel about these allegations?
I have two answers that are kind of incompatible, and I'm sorry for that. The first is that a lot of people are repulsed by it. They don't like to see this. They don't like to hear about this. But that leads to the second incompatibility here, and that is, or incompatible explanation here, that people prefer to live in denial. You have to understand, Jackie, the devastation and the horror of October 7th caused people to dissociate themselves from the suffering on the other side. What you show on Channel 4, what indeed other international news outlets show, is not seen by the vast majority of Israelis. There is a sense, an understandable sense of self-righteousness and victimhood. On the other hand, when they are exposed to this, it causes a majority of Israelis. What you showed in that interesting story, in that interesting report, is the extreme right wing. Now, I can dismiss them and say they're a negligible minority, but they're right there in the government, so I won't dismiss that. But most Israelis, a majority of Israelis, are repulsed by it when they are exposed to it.
But then,
as I said before.
Sorry to interrupt you, but if they are exposed to it, and we see more and more of these reports in recent weeks making the news. We know the United Nations, the EU, a raft of human rights groups are publicly condemning Israel's treatment of prisoners. But does Israel care? What is the collective responsibility to try and stop this?
It does care. The question is, why does it care? For fear of the International Criminal Court and the National Court of Justice, or international public opinion? Or does it care because it's patently illegal, patently immoral, and patently should not be done? I don't know. The government behaves as if it is more fearful of the legal repercussions abroad than it is about the immorality and inexcusability of all of this. I'm not going to defend the Israeli government here. I think this is a very bad, an abject and abysmal government from day one. But Israel does have mechanisms that deal with the legal mechanisms, investigative tools and processes that deal with these cases. Still, as I said at the outset, Jackie, even if 25% of what's in that report is accurate, it is absolutely, unequivocally inexcusable.
Elon Pincus, have to leave it there, but thank you very much for talking to us this evening. Thank you.